and I hope we'll be talking about interesting things. How did you start with entrepreneurship?
At school, I never had money, long time, so I always had to do some kind of work to basically finance partying and other great things. So at school, I started to buy and sell all kinds of sites. We went out and you know, whenever we found this in junkyards and other places, we then sold it. I then found out that it's maybe better to have a motorcycle to do that. So business is much more profitable than the other one.
Okay, at 15?
Yeah, wow. 16, 17. And then after school, I launched my first store immediately.
Yeah.
And that was a total disaster. The problem was that I'm not a real sales guy, not the other. So, but then lucky enough, I met my wife a year later, and she's a sales machine. So from one day to the other, the business turned extremely profitable, and that is, I started an apprentice at a major auction house and actually trained the profession of being an auctioneer, which was in the early 90s.
An apprenticeship in?
Business with that auction house, with a lady who was in charge of a department there, and she died. And so I decided to apply for the role. And the director said, and I had a good pitch, but you're too young for this department. And by the way, we also hired a guy, and he is a big museum, expert. So we'll have to take him, but university program. So for half a year, you can basically run this place. Oh, wow. So it's a great training for you. So I said, why not? It's a good idea. So I did one auction, and that was the most successful auction they ever had in the company. And it's a big auction house. They have like 500 employees. So when this guy came back from Japan, the director said to him, there's a problem because we cannot let this other guy go because he made such a successful auction. So the museum guy got really angry and he quit. So
before a few, I never understood. Some people just speak very fast when they try to sell. Does it work, or what are the mechanics of a good successful
auction selling? Running these numbers is a method of hypnosis. So it's actually at one point they wake up and only to find out that they spend 10x the amount that they actually wanted to spend.
Oh, wow.
That's the challenge of an auctioneer. But as an auctioneer, you also need to have the skill to bound with the audience. So the great auctioneers are by talent are extremely charming people, kind people, yet they know this kind of game very, very well.
Okay.
Besides what I already mentioned, a bad auctioneer will get easily distracted and easily nervous when a strange situation occurs, which happens very frequently at auction. Some bidders, accidentally bid. Some bidders bid on the wrong item. Numbers get mixed up. Pedals get mixed up. And a professional auctioneer will never get distracted, let alone impolite. And in smaller auction houses, you see this frequently. I think the best auctioneers that I've seen are all from the United Kingdom, are all the old school British gentleman type, and very rare to find, very rare to find.
I have to tell something to the audience about you because this is so fascinating to me. You said that in 1998, you made your first million in sales on eBay.
That's true. That's true. Yes.
So Auctionata, yes, Alex founded Auctionata, and in 3 years he brought it to 150 million in sales. So it's like an overnight success, but it's 20 years in the making, right? Almost.
Yeah, I mean, overnight success is the result of 30 years work, so exactly, which is always...
So tell us about the beginning, because this is fascinating. When you were online before most people, you went to eBay before most people. How did it start? How how did you decide to go there and start selling professionally?
Well, that's pretty simple. I had, we already discussed, I had built my own auction house at the time, and after I left Dorotheum, and it went into a bankruptcy after 2 years because I just couldn't, I was too inexperienced to handle a big operation. So, but the good thing about that was that I had the chance to redesign the company, and I relaunched the auction house half a year later. And I had a lot of debt, obviously, that I had to pay back. So, and at that time, I heard about eBay because one guy showed up one day in the company and said, "What's about all that unsold stuff here?" And I said, "Well, it's for sale." And he said, "Look, can I take some pictures, and in a week, I'll tell you what I buy." So the guy, and I thought this one other crazy guy who's never going to show up again. But a week later, he comes and buys about half of the items. And I said, so after he paid me, I said, so what's, I said, I'll take you, I'll buy you a drink. And after 2 free drinks, I said to him, what's the secret sauce? Because that doesn't happen too often. Yeah. And he started to tell me there is a place in the US where they have 1 million auctions a day. So I thought maybe the guy had too many drinks. But then it turned out, so I started to do some research, and I found eBay. And I thought, this is crazy. And since eBay was only in the US at the time, and the allowing time, I used the address of their address and started to sell on eBay. It was allowed a few months later to sell internationally, but the cool thing was I had always to work at night because of the time difference. So I was like staying up late at night or getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning. I had this history of building companies and sometimes, having a big success, sometimes having a huge failure. So she said to me, I'm sick and tired of this shit. This eBay is just another of your stupid ideas. Before we had this million, the problem with eBay was that at the time, eBay wouldn't host photos of items. It was actually new that you could show photos of items. Before that, it was just like a classified site. With a bit. So the problem was that, and I had a client who was running a computer company, and I asked him, and he said, for the number of auctions you're running, for the number of photos, you need a Sun workstation, which is, pretty computer at the end, 70,000 pounds. Wow. And with all this debt I already had, and with all this, my kids were at the time small, and I had to pay expensive school fees and all kinds of things. I was totally bankrupt. This computer and 1,000 pounds and some excess. At the end, it was no, not totally, but it was 100,000 pounds investment, and I hid it from my wife because I was sure she would divorce me. I had the full investment back, and this was in those days. eBay was really exploding, and the years to come then, solved my problems. And
you were on that, right?
Yeah. Well, what happened is that after a year, no less, about 9-10 months, I was I had collapsed, and my wife called the ambulance, and I was brought to the hospital. And I had diagnosis that my eyes had a problem because I had a computer overdose, complete overdose. And that's when not so many people. We started with 1 or 2 employees, then 3, and at the end, when I sold the business 10 years later, we had 56. We kept the business lean and were able to grow the revenue within all these years significantly.
How did you realize you hit the natural limit of eBay? eBay can bring you?
I don't know, actually. It's interesting. When we started to build these eBay seller associations in 2002, 2003, we had met sellers from all over the world. At the same time, I had this engagement with eBay where I would speak in front of larger audiences of sellers at their, what they called eBay Live conventions. And it turned out that, eBay was so big already, and so many sellers from so many time, a lot of fraud came up on eBay, and it was very hard for them to deal with it. Yeah. And at the time I didn't understand, but now I know how difficult it is. So hard to bring the average. Those days it was around 300 euros.
Because of the nature of the customer?
No, I had incredible customers. I found customers that were, I had this one guy, I can't obviously mention the name, but he was a Pakistani guy, and he bought 2 columns for $6,000, didn't pay for them. And he got tons of negative feedback from all kinds of customers that he, bought items from. And the funny thing was that I thought this guy was on a buying spree, on a shopping spree overnight, or even more. So I thought maybe there is something, and I checked out and I found out the address of the guy, and my wife had a trip to New York, so I said, visit this guy and find out what's happening. So she found the guy, and the guy was running a taxi parlor, and he said, so he said to my wife, look, I came from Pakistan 4 years ago, and I was a cab driver on my own, and now I have 700 taxis. And I bought a house, and so he just couldn't handle all these emails and everything. So at the end, we sold him the whole, everything that is in his house came from us. We were the only ones to visit him. So you could find amazing buyers on eBay. We had stars, we had, we had Britney uses dedicated barcode to ship stuff into the White House to cross security, all kinds of things.
That's crazy.
At the end of the day, it's not about the customers, it's about the trust that the customers have in the brand of eBay. I would say is limited, with the exception of 1 or 2 categories, to a few hundred euros or pounds.
And there's this crazy story which Alex told me this afternoon about, and you just happened to be there.
Yeah, I stumbled accidentally in a talk. It was at an eBay Powerseller convention, and there was this guy from Google, and Google was at the time the hip search engine, but Yahoo, I think, was still pretty big in the business, and the guy had a presentation on how to advertise on Google. And in those days when you're at how to advertise on Google, there was literally nothing. Just tell me the place which is most far away from this presentation, because why would I want to advertise? So I actually only listened because I wanted to listen to the guy. Yeah. And so obviously I took some stuff with me, and I remember, what he told us was that you can book a keyword, and whenever someone in the world enters that ad, what happened 2 weeks later is that my lumbering and farming business told me that she bought a big bunch of, I think, 1,500 trees, which were rotten, dead. And so she got conned by a guy. And she couldn't do anything against him. The police wouldn't investigate it because they wanted more proof. So that whole thing started to delay. I launched a forum to see if other people have been affected too.
By the same guy?
Yeah, by the same guy. Mm-hmm. But that forum was dead. And so that, for whatever reason, brought back into my mind the idea, why don't I buy the name, his name, Sepp Holzer. I booked the keyword, and in those days you could add whatever you wanted. So I said, biggest cook in the world, if you want to learn more, go to this forum. And I forgot about it.
It was cheap, right?
It was cheap, it was 7 cents, 6 cents a keyword. The guy, and the forum exploded. There are hundreds of people that got got conned by this guy.
She didn't know when you set up.
No, I didn't tell her. Yeah. I thought it's just a test. So I went back and I saw the clicks, and I had paid $100. And I said to my wife, so if this works, it's got to work with everything we have in our online shop, with every category. We can advertise everything. It's going to bring hundreds of people.
That's when you realized you want to bring the platform.
At the time, we had the discussion within the Powerseller groups that we said we need to be more independent from eBay, but nobody really had a clue. And when Google came in, Google actually created e-commerce. Yeah. That's what they did. And it was so crazy. My monthly bill after 3 months on Google was, I think, 50K. And we had built several online shops which were doing really well. And or maybe 30K, something like that, but it was pretty large for those days. And one day they emailed me or even sent a letter and said, you have spent whatever, 150, 200K on a platform. We'd like to refund this money to you and then charge you again from another account, which is based in somewhere in Europe instead of the US. And would you agree? We'll refund your credit card and we'll bill you. I said, yeah, sure, no problem. As long as you don't bill me more than I paid originally, it's fine with me. So they refunded the card, but they never charged me again, never ever. And then 2 months later, I get a long letter, like 10 pages, from the district attorney of, I think, New York. It said, I was a victim of Google click fraud, and I'm supposed to get a refund of several $100,000. I should just sign this, whatever it was, documents.
Seriously?
So yeah, I signed it, sent it there, and got some money from them. That was in those days. That's the first time I understood what it means, what a startup is, because I said to myself, if these guys can afford this kind of loss and still build a so massively profitable business, this is going to the roof. So that's a really scalable business. That became clear to me at that time.
And now, long story short, you said the year of 2007 was one of the best to date for you. It was very successful. The auctions were doing well.
No, it was generally, we had built 41 online shops, which we were advertising through Google in various geographies and various verticals. They were all doing well. The offline business was doing well, the traditional auction and the eBay business, and we had built at that time, a proprietary software platform which helped us basically juggle the merchandise across a pretty decent number of marketplaces in lots of geographies. I mean, eBay at the time was not only the only one, there were more of them. And between our shop and our offline presences. And 2007 year was the best.
In 2007?
Yes. I actually started to sell it in 2007 and then closed in 2008. I sold it to some guys who were still are running a large jewelry manufacturing business. They were in a platform they could use to run online shops, run online auctions across various marketplaces using APIs, which was at the time, there was still in 07, all these things had to be handmade. There was nothing there. As I told you, the first multi-channel software was actually Channel Advisor, which I think launched in 2003. Scott Wingo, it's still listed on the NASDAQ under ecom tag. But in those days, that proprietary software, which would allow you to cross multiple channels, was something worth to acquire.
And the business is still doing well. It still exists, right? The business they bought from you.
Yeah, it still exists. It's a very, very large business. It's one of the largest businesses in Asia. And overall, and run out, and I kept getting checks a long, long time from these guys after the initial sale. And it was a good deal.
And then you decided to do something else and build a new business.
Yeah, actually an eBay for a higher price point. That's a good question. Well, in the beginning I didn't want. I had the idea already in 2005 and I wrote the memo. And then I decided to go on a retreat for like a week. I chose a golf resort, but I thought it's good because I don't play golf, so I have nothing to do there. I just write the memo. But I ended up with very little. I thought it just was very complicated. I couldn't get the idea. Okay, what would be the USP of such, a product? And then I came back with more questions than I went there. And so I scrapped the idea, and fundamentally I had no plans to launch a business in 2008, and I actually retired, and I started to play online bridge, which was cool. There was a place in a game website in Poland where they offered it, and it was, that's actually the funny part of the story. It's called Kurnik, cage.
Yeah.
And they were offering all kinds of games, but I was playing this game and it's run on ELO ranking, and I used to play, my math teacher brought me to bridge very early. To his And so I started to 4 or 5 hours a day in the dark and, trying to improve the ranking, which was fun. But then at some point I thought, wait a minute, there's always these like 3 guys I'm playing with in a room at the same time. And if this is possible with 3 guys, it's also possible with an audience like that. So I could actually conduct an auction using exactly that technology.
Same mechanics, yeah.
Yeah, it was, and that's what I thought, that could be a USP. That could be something new, to really do a real auction, not a timed auction like on eBay. So what I did is I met the guy, and I was there with my wife, and what happened is we had this conversation with the guy, and when I left I was totally enthusiastic, and I said, we're going to build this with this guy, and he's going to help us, and blah, blah, blah. And Susie said to me, she said, how come you're so enthusiastic? I mean, the guy literally threw us out of the office and said he wasn't interested. And that's kind of describes a little bit our 2 characters. I'm always enthusiastic, and she's always a bit skeptic, and it gets us through the middle.
Just for the audience, your wife is a co-founder at Auctionata.
She is a co-founder, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you wanted to build Auctionata. So how did you go about it? How did you start?
Well, the CEO of eBay in Germany introduced me to another co-founder who was the CTO of Auctionata for many years, Georg Untersalmberger. And, we literally designed, we did a few wireframes and said that's going to be the product. Mm-hmm. And then he hired a couple of guys from your hometown, Bratislava. We built an amazing engineering team there. Yeah. But then the problem was that I had, worked with that technology, but I've never built something into it. I'm not a tech guy. I've never done engineering, nothing. So I had this strange understanding that, or belief actually, that I have to build a large website, a fully scaled product for launch, which is completely wrong. So we worked 1.5 years on a technology that never worked. And when we launched it in 2011, it was a complete disaster. And
so I'm sure many of these people in the audience can relate to that. You build something, you're excited about it, it doesn't work. Then how do you deal with it? This is the game changer which separates the good founders, successful ones, from the ones who just give up.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
I can tell you, I had a lot of learnings from that launch, and within 3 months after we launched it, I was absolutely sure that with a few changes, this could be an amazing product. Mm-hmm. And I was convinced, and I told you that I had the meeting with Lars, who you met from Holzbring Ventures, which is a venture fund in Germany. And we met with the guys from Holzbring and with the partner meeting with the IC, with the investment committee, and I gave them the pitch, and they decided to make the investment. The funny thing is that years later, 3 years later, at whatever reason, I have a conversation with my wife. She tells me, I still cannot forget that you were so positive in this meeting, although these guys were really hostile. And I said, wait a minute, they were not hostile. They were totally friendly. We had a great time. She said, no, they were really skeptical, and they said, this is all bullshit what you're telling us. I said, I can't remember that. I thought, and so that again is, your question was, how do you deal with it? I think if you're afraid, there's no way you're going to launch anything. It's not your destiny to launch anything if you're afraid. I was never afraid. I was only afraid when we had lots of customers and lots of auctions, because I couldn't see how are we going to deal with this. I was afraid when we had the first 100 people in the company, or the first 300 or 500 people in the company. When the guard won't let me into my own company because I don't have my security check and he doesn't know me. But I was never afraid to launch something.
Yeah. So you launched something, it didn't work, and you decided to get some external expertise by teaming up with a good VC company, venture capital company.
Yeah, a really good one.
And it worked.
Yeah, it worked. It worked because the partner was right. Lars is a very down-to-earth guy, so he's 100% opposite of me. And so as a team, we did very well together.
So how many investors did you see and pitch to them before you found some company which you said yes to?
But only this one. I never pitched any others. But I sent a plan to 24, and it declined me right away, which I found interesting because I would never decline an investment without having seen the product. And they had never seen the product.
Yeah.
But that is a big difference between Europe and the US, because in the US, no investor will ever turn you down until they have seen your product. Because their philosophy is the product right? Then they want to know, is the market right? Is the opportunity right?
That's interesting.
What's the competition? And then they look at the founders, not the other way
you
around.
have the investor, and then you have some cash to use it wisely. How did you use it? The investment from them, and you also co-invested, right?
Yeah, well, I invested the largest amount in the beginning, and they did a small amount on top of that with an option to call if the business was doing well, which they called 3 months later.
Yeah.
So we were in with about the same amount of money. I think if you haven't sold a successful business, you don't need money. You should look into family and friends to fund you, but if you've already sold a business before, you should always invest. And I also invested in later rounds, smaller amounts, obviously, than the large VCs.
Yeah.
I mean, we did 3 rounds with a total of over 70 million, so that's obviously a lot more than an individual would and should ever invest. But it's important, specifically in the beginning, to show your commitment in time and in money.
It's confidence, yes.
Yes.
And you decided you're from Vienna?
Yes. Yes.
And you started in Vienna, and development team was just across the border in Slovakia. And you decided it's time to go and live somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, we thought, we knew already that the product would do well. So the idea was maybe we need to hire a team of 10 to 15 people within like 1 month. So that means you'll have maybe 500 interviews or 1,000 interviews within a month or 1.5 months. So that's a lot, because if an interview takes half an hour or an hour between 3 co-founders, that means a lot of time you're investing. And so we thought we need a place where we can get a lot of candidates. And Vienna didn't barely have a startup ecosystem at the time. So there was just London and Berlin. And London was too expensive. I think it's less expensive now than it was at the time. And Berlin was very cheap. It's more expensive now than it was at the time. And so we chose Berlin.
Yeah. And you came to Berlin and you didn't find a place like WeWork because there were no places like that. You rented a hotel room.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't go into the city and take an apartment without having launched a company. It doesn't make any sense. So we took a hotel room, and we launched a co-op. I was prepared to stay there for all the time, but eventually my wife found an apartment. You can still find in this room, it's called the H10 Hotel in Berlin, Joachimsthaler Straße. It's the room 352, and if you look, it's a high room because it used to be a manufacturing company. And at the very upper right corner, you can still find some remainders of the tuna fish pizza that I threw there when our product guy fucked up a release.
So you weren't just living there; it was your office.
It was everything. It was all of our office.
It was your co-working space.
Yeah,
a hotel room. Rented.
Actually, an eBay pal, the global head of eBay security, Oli Weiergraf, I wanted to hire him as a CEO before we even launched, because I thought I'd be more the creative part, need like a business CEO, which is not so much what I like to do. But he had just exited another company, and so he said, I have to go on a long sail tour. So that didn't work out, but he said, when he saw the hotel room, he said, okay, you can have a room in my office, which is just 2 floors below yours, of the company that he just had sold.
Yeah.
And so we took this one room as an office additionally. And they had a great guy, Bernhard Wolters, who helped us to build the technological infrastructure, servers, etc. we needed. We then hired him directly from the company, still with Auctionata. And when Oli came back 6 months later, when he sold the business, they released a few people and integrated it in other companies. It was like 1/3 of the staff was gone. And when he came back, the whole big office, which has like twice the size of the room here, there was a huge buzz going on. Lots of people, lots of busy people, and lots of, you could feel there's something going on. And Ollie said to the manager of Arento, he said, so this is crazy. What have you made of this company? I mean, there's such a huge buzz here going on. He said, well, no, we've rented half of it to Auctionata guys. so he was very surprised to see what happened in just 6 months.
Yeah. So you built technology, and then you started to launch the company. You launched the version 2.0, Auctionata. And there's a question on Slido. For you, dear audience, if you want, if you just take out the mobile, open your browser, and just type in slido.com. That's it. It's very simple. Whatever you want to ask, feel free to ask. We promise the top questions will be answered. You will decide which ones. And Diego is asking, what has been your biggest challenge? And how did you manage to build traction?
With two questions.
With the version 2.0.
Yeah, so the biggest challenge, there's so many challenges that you will have a hard time to find out what's the biggest. I think the biggest challenge is the number of the challenges. It's a huge number. You run into permanent challenges. And
which ones stick out in your mind most as being the most complex?
I think at the end of the day, it's one of the biggest advantages also turns out to be one of the biggest challenges, and that is living in a foreign city. I'm very, very, home-oriented. I have a hard time leaving home, and I'm very Viennese, and Viennese and Germans is very different. So living in Berlin was not easy for me. But it turned out to be the best decision we ever made for the company.
Yeah.
And so getting those two things together, on one side knowing that Berlin is the ideal place for the business, but at the same time knowing that I'm never going to be a Berliner, rather an Austrian, was hard. Reasons why I eventually decided the operational role 4 years later.
Yeah, and I also heard that one of the biggest technological challenges for Auctionata was latency.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
the biggest challenge in live stream in general.
How did you solve it?
Well, the problem is latency. The issue with latency is that if you watch this in a live stream here with spectators who posting questions, latency of 5 seconds is no problem. Mm-hmm. But with a live bid, when the auctioneer raises the hammer and the image comes 3 seconds late, you cannot bid anymore. Technology which helps us to stream globally, and % of our bids come through mobile. So, and today, we've solved that problem, but it took us a long, long time. So when you see it now, the connection is not very good, but we'll see. When you see the product, you see that it comes with literally no latency. So that's a live auction site. 800 auctions a year, so there's a couple of them every day. And you can bid in real time. Uh-huh. And that is available in multiple languages, in Chinese, in German, obviously, in English, in Russian, and many other things.
So Auctionata also holds a record for the most expensive item sold online.
Yes.
What happened? And you told me it happened on the mobile.
It happened on a mobile, yes. The winning bidder was from Shanghai, and he used his app, and it was late there. It was like 2 a.m. in the morning, so he was in a nightclub. And he was terrified that he could lose the connection. So I said he had to go out on the terrace all the time where all the smokers are, and I hate smokers. So it was a clock which sold for 3.8 million. It's not the most expensive item that ever sold online. eBay still has that record for a Learjet, which sold for 5.5 million, long time ago. But it's the most expensive work of art that ever sold online. And we beat our own record. We sold a painting for 1.8 million 2 years earlier, and before that, ArtNet had the record with 1.5 million. Yeah. So we're actually the only ones to ever have sold items in this sphere. But that clock had a starting price of only 100,000 euros, and so there were 20 bidders engaged, and in the final bidding battle was very fierce, and it had a special kick for me because we are whitelisting bidders for items that have a starting price or estimate above 100K.
Yeah.
So you cannot just go in and bid, obviously. And but you always got these last minute guys who want to bid on something, and they are then, basically posting 10 credit cards at a time and say, I'll make a deposit of 200K, I want to have this item, blah, blah, blah. So they had one of those guys, and he was bidding, I think 3.4 million. Or 3.3 million. That was his bid, his first time he bid, and went into the bidding slot, and I was in my office and actually watching the auction, and I got a call from security, and they said, I got a bid for 3.3 million, and you need to approve it. And it gave me the number, and I look at the client number, I look it up, and I see all the record of the guys, a new customer, etc. Not whitelisted, lots of credentials, but you never know if it's going to work out. 200K deposit, but that's nothing compared to 3.4 million or whatever. So I felt a little bit like the guy, the big casino guy in Las Vegas, where they say, do you accept this bet? Yeah. And he says, looking and thinking. And I said, okay. And I accepted it. I accepted the bid. But when I accepted, in the second I accepted the bid, I said, oh, Jesus Christ. I hope that someone will outbid this guy. And it took 2 minutes until the final winner then outbid him, which was like the longest 2 minutes in my life, because having this kind of sale which falls through is a disaster for the vendor, because the vendor doesn't get the money. So it's really serious. So not sure if I would do it again, but in any case, this guy from Shanghai took so long to bid because he had no connection. So he was running around that nightclub, and I had a PR then call him and ask him if we could, release his name to the press, because he's a very well-known guy. He's a billionaire, Chinese billionaire, who started as a cab driver too, by the way. So it's maybe a good idea, good business, a good starting point. And he's a real estate billionaire, and he said, yeah, you give me free shipping and you can release my name. And he sent a smartphone image with his wife and a couple of other people at this nightclub with his smartphone and the clock on it like this. So it's typically Chinese. And that was released to the press then.
Yeah, so you have a long history of Chinese, of being successful in the Chinese market because of antiques clothes.
Clocks each to have this cuckoo clock, regulator clocks, and in Europe they're very cheap because there's so many of them. So we started to basically export them to China via one of our online shops. And when eBay bought Skype, they introduced this feature to the website, and we started to use it and have Chinese customer support, which eventually got me a title story in Newsweek magazine, because at some point it became clear that the Skype purchase would not, yield the profitability that Meg Whitman had expected, and so the press department had to find, someone who's actually using it. And they went on a very long search, from what I hear, and eventually found me, and it turned out that I was literally the only large seller to use Skype at the time. So that's why Newsweek brought that story. And but for us, it was our way into the Chinese market.
Yeah. So fast forward to Auctionata, you had the second version built. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you get the first customers on it?
Well, we thought, if we want to be an end-to-end marketplace, we need to acquire the merchandise. And the one thing I learned from Meg Whitman, who was the eBay CEO at the time, she had one credo where she said, for marketplaces in general, there is the chicken and egg question, which people will always, what do I do? How do I get traction? What she said was, you have to choose one side of the equation, and you have to deliver value to these users very early in time. And so we said, okay, let's focus on the sellers. Let's just get a lot of stuff on the site and forget the buyers. Just try to get sellers and work with sellers.
Yeah.
That turned out to be a huge challenge because sellers said, you have no buyers, so why would we, waste our time on your site? So we had to convince the first sellers one-on-one. But then we did something when we launched Auctionata 2.0, which was really crazy. We said, okay, we build an expert network. Let's let's take 3 verticals. So we choose watches, art, and jewelry. Let's hire, on a commission basis, like 20, 30 experts, and let's offer everyone who comes to the site a free valuation. And then, whatever, they offer to us that is really interesting, we try to bring into the auctions. And that was an instant hit. When we launched that feature in February 15, 2012, it got instant 27 offers. And the first day it was online. Okay. 27 or 21, I don't remember. I think it was 27, but it was beyond expectation. And we then started to focus Google advertising on those channels. And as of today, we have 355,000 valuation cases with over 5 million items in total that we have.
And how do you pay these experts? You pay only when you sell, right?
Yes, we pay them a small fee, and it's funny enough, but they've done millions of valuations for us overall. Yeah. And we even bought a UK company last year, Value My Stuff, and another one, St. George Valuation, which are run by Patrick van der Forst, who used to be head of the global furniture department at Sotheby's, and who had built the same business. He was at Sotheby's and went into this, it's called Dragon's Den. Okay. And he got 2 investors, and he launched his valuation service. And he had the same idea, but he never converted then these valuations into auctions. And we immediately built the auction engine after we had the valuation service, following Meg Whitman's rule. And so we launched, we did 1 test auction in December 2012, and then launched a weekly live stream auction with 1 auction a week in May 2013. Before May 2013, we had no revenue.
So when you launch, how do you make sure you have enough, you have 1 item to sell, right?
Yeah.
And how do you make sure you have enough buyers who can, outbid each other? How do you do that?
Well, that's very difficult because no one knows your place. You have no customer list, so you could say you're really fucked because you have to find customers. And but our assumption was if we'd had the right items, it will be easier to attract customers if the prices are really, let's say, seducingly low. And then there is another thing that I also learned from eBay, and that is, never do something that someone else has done. And the internet is magic because there's nothing that someone else hasn't done before. Yeah. So we thought, wait a minute, there's all these blogs, all these search engines like ArtPrice or ArtNet or Wine Search or Chrono24, there's all these marketplaces. Why don't we just list the fact that we have an auction on all these blogs and marketplaces and just try to get as many customers on the website we could? So we listed on hundreds of them, and eventually the first auction got I'd say for the fact that it was the first auction, it got a good traction. It had some really interesting buyers there and some really interesting results. And then we said, okay, we have to have like 1 auction a week always at the same time so that people would know, okay, it's Friday, 6 p.m., I'll just check out the live auction.
That's a very good idea. It's like, watching a series, a favorite series on TV.
At the end, that's the way it works.
Yes.
And so, but we had to source for these auctions, so we got, I found the wine cellar here, and a Yves Saint Laurent wardrobe there, and a Marklin toy collection here. So we listed all these auctions, and they all did well. They all did well.
I see on Slido that the sound is not good. Can you guys hear us well or not? No? Is it too low? Chris, can we please sort out the sound? Let's try, because we don't want to have people not listening to us. Okay, we'll sort it out. Now, Item-wise, how did you focus on Auctionata? So you say you started with jewelry, with wine?
Yeah, we started with watches, fine art, which is paintings, and Asian art were the three key areas. And then we had also watches and toys and wine and some other and vintage fashion on the side with lower revenue targets.
Okay. You didn't want to expand the assortment to other items? You just focus on those three?
Yeah, well, in the meantime, we had a lot of verticals, such as classic cars and contemporary art and prints and photography and all kinds of collectibles and lots of categories.
Yes. What is now the most popular item category?
The classic cars.
Classic cars?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Did you ever buy any car on your own platform?
I have no driver's license, so
really?
I have no need for a car. And I hate to drive, as a fact. I think, there's a subway in every big city, so why would I, and those who don't have a subway are so small that you can walk, so why would you need a car? And, some other people from the company bought a car here and there. We sold a Ferrari short nose 250 GTB for 2.6 million, an F50 for 1.5 million, and a couple of Aston Martins, many Porsches. We had Porsche only sales, Mercedes only sales, Ferrari only. We had one sale with 27 Ferraris in it. Was an amazing sale. It had
27 Ferraris.
Yeah, 27 Ferraris. It was in September 2015, and we did it with a partner company called Schaltkulisse from Munich, and it was just crazy. It was a live show from there. We broadcast with the auctioneer in Berlin in the studio, and a satellite broadcast from Munich, from an airfield from Airbus where all these cars were, and we had a very famous German television personality hosting it, and there was audience bidding and satellite bidding and live bidding from Berlin, and it was really crazy. And the guy, Wolfgang, one of the early guys at Auctionata who had done this auction, I never forget, because I had a debriefing call with him in the next morning after the sale, and he was completely drunk when I called him. He called me, and I said, this is the first time he's punctual, because he's never punctual when he should call me. So I was a bit, why is he on time? And then he was totally drunk because they were at the Oktoberfest in Munich. After the whole bunch, I wasn't there, so after the auction, because it was so successful. Imagine I think they sold 22 cars, 22 Ferraris in an online auction. They had bidders. They had one bidder from Honduras, one bidder from the Emirates, one guy from Australia. So they've been shipping these Ferraris all over the planet. Just a crazy experience.
Wow. So far, you told me you sold over 100,000 items, worth over 300,000. Is this dollars or euros?
I think it's 300 million.
300 million, yes.
Yeah. So we had the first auction in May 2013. So that's about 3.5 years. We sold. We auctioned items for about 290 million euros. So that's about 280 million pounds nowadays. And that's about 85,000 items across all platforms. So one thing you should know is obviously that Paddle8, which we merged with in 2016, wasn't part of the Auctionata conglomerate before, but we count the sales success of all the platforms, of which consist Auctionata, Paddle8 today.
We'll talk about Paddle8 a bit later. Let's talk a little bit about the technology you have, because it's quite interesting. So we discussed the no latency live stream bidding engine you have. Next thing you said you built is this accuracy tracking method. What is that?
Well, that is how we track experts' accuracy. The issue is that some experts will have a hard time valuing items and judging items from online images. It's not about telling whether the item is a fake or original, because that we can check on premises. That's a different assignment. But to put the right value supposing an item is an original is also difficult online. And so for us, it's very important to determine what is the right value for the customer, because if we tell the customer, the seller, the wrong value, and the seller says it's not worth sending and sells it on the flea market and it turns out to be $1 million piece, we would be liable, massively liable. And so we started to analyze the valuations that the experts gave and help them to improve by determining the accuracy of the judgment, the appraisal versus the sale result and versus the customer experience, because sometimes it happens as the item is just misdescribed and we have to accept the return. And over time, it helped us to build what today we see a very functional and efficient expert network with experts from a little more than 40 countries, valuing items in over 100 categories.
Okay.
And it's done 100% online.
Tim, on Slido, could artificial intelligence or machine learning remove humans from the bidding process?
Well, remove is maybe the wrong word, because you cannot stop humans to do something. By experience, they typically do what they want to do. But the question would be if artificial intelligence could actually improve the bidding process. And I mean, fundamentally, I could not think of any vertical in our lives that could not be improved by artificial intelligence. I just think it's more, alternate intelligence, because the way humans think is a mixture of emotions and analysis, and machines have no emotions, so they just analyze, which is why they better analyze typically than humans. And in the bidding process, analyze plays a big role. But bidding, I like the comparison, with poker, because that's a game I play for a long, long time. And the reason why computers are so successful in playing chess or Go, as we discussed, but they are total failure in playing poker, is because there is an emotional component in there, which consists of understanding what people typically do in what kinds of situations. With a very strong analytical and mathematically based part, and neither of them work without the other, which is typically human. So artificial intelligence can help in one part of the equation, but not in both. So my theory around artificial intelligence, specifically when it comes to complex emotional and analytic process, is that by eliminating the difficulties around analysis, it will enable human beings to better control their emotions, or even make emotions more efficient, which I think is the key driver to control certain processes. So when we started to build the auction engine, we said we used the game theory as the model by Neumann, and which basically says that any game, and hence the auction, is a sequence of events, and every participant needs to know his full set of options at any point in the sequence. Again, very similar to poker. But not all humans are aware of understanding the full set of options available to them at a certain point in the sequence. Simply because the brain is a bit tricky, and sometimes it uses the emotion to make a decision. So, as we said, you're being dragged by the auctioneer only to find out that you paid 10x what you actually originally wanted to pay, because your brain just skipped out the eventuality, the option in the process to just stop bidding. It wasn't available anymore. You never thought, wait a minute, I could have stopped bidding. Computers will always analyze this process and at least offer the right option by their standards.
Yes, so that's the answer to the question of AI, machine learning, and difference between humans and machines. Now, Auctionata just took off very fast. When I watched your talk 2 years ago about the results, it's incredible how much growth you had in the meantime. You then wanted to go to the biggest market in the world, which is the US, and you decided not to start the operations there, but buy a company, Paddle8.
That's not exactly true. We decided to start the operations there, which turned out to be a total failure, and then we bought the company. No, it wasn't a total failure. We were very lucky. We had an amazing guy there, Joe Stasco, who was our CEO in the US, and he basically on his own, built this company over there with a couple of other very good guys, but we invested a lot of money, and it never, it yielded, it actually outperformed the targets, but at the same time we understood that this market is so huge that it's going to cost us more than 100 million, to launch there.
Yeah.
And so we thought maybe it's better. When the idea with Paddle8 came up, and I met the founders the first time, I thought this could be a good thing to do, but they weren't interested. But over time, we built some kind of a friendship, and eventually I could convince one of the founders, Alex Gilkes, is a British guy who lives in New York, and he's the mastermind, if you will, of Paddle8, and he was very scared that the Germans would ruin the Paddle8 brand, which was true, because Germans are not real salespeople, and no marketing people, and no brand people. Very different to the Americans. So at some point I could reassure him that we would respect the culture. And I eventually fulfilled the promise, because it's the Paddle8 brand that will prevail globally, and the Auctionata brand is going to disappear, because the Paddle8 business is much smaller than the Auctionata business, but the brand is known across the USA. You will not find a contemporary art collector, I bet, who hasn't heard or dealt with Paddle8.
Yeah. So now we are called Auctionata Paddle8, and going forward, the business will be rebranded to just Paddle8.
That's right. Yeah, in 6 months from now.
Okay. Now, you went through a phase where Auctionata is growing very fast. It's scaling. Challenges when a company goes through scaling, which you need to pay attention to.
I think do different.
Yes,
learn
even better. Yeah.
We covered that in our afternoon conversation. You keep hearing when you launch a company, you should spend a lot of time with your team, right? And we all say to ourselves, we do it, but then if we count the hours, we say it's actually not a lot of time. So when I launch my next business, it will be much simpler than Auctionata. Not because I want to build a simple business, but because I fundamentally believe to build an extremely successful business, you need a lot of time to spend with your team. And you will not have that time if you build a complex business. You will only have that time if you build a primitive business. And spending a lot of time with the team means for me 1/3 of the time. So that's, if you work 60 hours a week, that means 20 hours every week you just invest into building the team. And that's for every founder in the company. So that's a lot of hours. That's a lot of time you spend with the team. And the one thing we learned at Auctionata, because I never had a company with more than 50, 60 employees, 70 at the peak. And Auctionata has today, I think, 400, 500 employees, and then several hundred experts on top of that, freelancer, who make money, who have a regular income from Auctionata. So it's a pretty big team now. And from the first 50 people we hired, the founders hired, 32 are still in the company today, which is a large number.
Yeah.
For a startup, it's very little fluctuation. But from the second 100, only 22 are still in the company. So the mistake we made is we hired great people, but those people couldn't hire great people. And that is because we didn't teach them how to do it. Because we hired people who were in the late 20s, early 30s, with 1, 2, 3 jobs, not more than that before. So a small career, but very ambitious and hardworking and very skilled and intelligent and willing to learn. And some of them have key roles at Auctionata today. What I would today is, if I hire people like this, I would send them to trainings to learn how to hire other people, because you're not going to get beyond 50 people. You just stand no chance, because you cannot do all these interviews. When you apply for a job at Google or Amazon or American Express, they'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 interviews.
Yes.
5 interviews. They give you a sign-on bonus, 20, 30K, just for signing the contract. The only reason why they do it, it's very simple, is because they're saying, this is the way how we get 5 interviews from you. And when they get 5 interviews, they learn so much about you that they literally eliminate 80% of the chances to have a total failure.
Yes.
You cannot eliminate it 100%, but you need to work extremely hard. The second thing I would do different is within the first group, 10, 15, 20 people you have, I would not hire a single person that hasn't talked to everyone in the team and where everyone on the team has given their go. Because this is the only way how you create this crazy crowd, this core group, that will remain the DNA of the company.
That's the right culture, yes. Yeah. That's fair enough. Now,
and by the way, you mentioned the word culture, which is like the most hated word for me, because culture is always there, regardless if you do it or not. But if you don't influence, it's coming all over you,
yes.
And it's eventually going to kill you. So you need to work hard on team and culture. And the ambition that I would have is, we talked about that too, I cannot, give you an office which is better than your home, but I can at least try to compete with your home so that, and give you the opportunity to create it as well, so that you'd really want to be in that office. And I think this is the number one thing, the most important thing you should do as a founder. That's the role that is expected from you, from the team.
You want to make sure they feel comfortable in the office and they enjoy being there and working from there.
Yes, yeah. That's key, absolutely key.
Now, you hired a CEO and you stepped down from the business. What is the vision for Auctionata going forward?
Well, the vision for Auctionata going forward is to be the key transactional platform for luxury, secondary luxury market in the world. I think we're already that, but the luxury market is growing massively. The secondary market is still highly fragmented. So we'll be building a multi-billion-dollar business at the end of the day. But the problem here is to build a platform that works in all geographies, in all verticals, and for merchants of all kinds.
Yeah.
So that's a huge challenge for product and technology teams, which is pretty large at Auctionata, but not as large as another, major companies, obviously, because we can't afford it. And so we spend from now at least another year to build that technology to the point where we can then go into another massive scaling process. And that's a lot of hard work from the whole global management and integration teams.
It is, yeah. So looking at some questions from Slido towards the end, you already answered the question, how did you get your first 1,000 customers and convince them they can trust that you can sell originals and non-expensive fakes? Because you said you had the experts, right?
The expert network played a big role, but also, you see, the USP of the live stream auction is that you see real people and real objects in the auction.
Yeah.
And the very first test auction, we had one item that sold. So I got on the phone and I asked him, I said, at the end of the day, you don't have any proof that that business really exists. And so you send this kind of money around the globe and hope for the item to arrive. And he said to me, I watch auction television and I see item there. So you have item. So why not ship? And I said, well, that's actually pretty logic, which told me that there is a big strength if you actually have proof that there are real physical people handling real items. That was the key trust deliverer for Auctionata, and it is still today.
That's a very good insight. The last question on Slido which we have is, in a space with so many competitors, how do you remain relevant?
Well, you could say by fooling around all the time, by getting noticed. No, I think Relevance has to do something with the sheer number of items that are being offered on the marketplace. Customers will always go for the site that has the biggest offering. That's very clear. And the second in our auction business is low starting prices. Will always attract buyers. I think if you respect those two components, you can build a decent business based on it.
It's simple, it's fair enough. Let's take 2 more questions from the audience before we wrap up. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand and ask away. There you go.
You were saying prior to Auctionata in 2007, you were running, was it right in here in 41 websites? Different.
Yes, you could call it websites. It was actually online shops. So most of what those websites consisted was the same on all of the 41 sites. Right. Only the content was different, the URL was different, because it was targeted to a certain vertical and a certain audiences. Those were the days where names and the URL would still be have a massive impact on Google search engines. We know it's not the case today anymore, but in those days, if you'd had a URL like anti-cupboard, whenever someone would enter anti-cupboard on Google, regardless of geography, you'd always be on the first page. That was the key at the time. Right. Today, this doesn't work anymore.
Okay, thank you.
One more question?
I think the gentleman over there somewhere.
Can you raise your hand?
Okay, right here. Yes, there you go.
Sorry if you said the answer to this earlier. The question is just about going back to the experts and how you actually board.
There is an association, a trade board. In Germany it's called in the United Kingdom, but experts are typically registered with that chamber. And so it's pretty easy to get a list of appraisers, of certified appraisers. In America, it's the AAA, the American Appraisers Association. You have that list, and somebody, just cold called, starting with A down to Z. That's what we did.
So you asked the expert bodies and approached people?
Yeah, we said, would you be interested in, valuing things online? And 9 out of 10 experts would say, well, I can't value anything or appraise anything based on a photo. And a few would be interested in the challenge. And in the beginning, it was very difficult. We had to call a lot of people.
Yeah.
Now it's the other way around. We have a waiting list with experts that we test for the system, and if they perform well, we accept them into the group. But it's very difficult today to become an Auctionata expert in certain verticals. And back in the old days, it was very hard for us to get them.
Yeah, now we already proven yourself, they are there. On a closing note, is a smart question, interesting question on Slido. What's the strangest piece you've ever sold on your platform?
There was a blog somewhere, I think on Variety or Vanity Fair, someone that listed the 10 strangest items we sold. So I'll try to recall. I think one was, we had this, it's an ostrich egg, but prehistoric, like 10 million years old or something, which sold for 40,000 euro. We had a bottle of, we had a suit from the first dog that flew to space.
Oh, wow.
But it was, the dog never came back, so it was the training suit of the dog that sold for an enormous amount of money to one of the investors, the first investors into SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's company.
Yeah.
And one of the guys who invested in this company bought that suit. And actually in the same auction, it also had a 3/4 empty tube of nutrition for astronauts, which had been in the space and came back, which we started, I think, at 50 euro. It sold for 10,000. So if you find this piece somewhere, you wouldn't even pick it up from the floor.
It's a collectible right there.
Yeah, it's pretty funny collectible. We also had shoehorn made of pure gold with monogram in diamonds, which was owned by Frank Sinatra. And we didn't know. It was given to a gift to some movie director who then sold it, whatever. It showed up and it was valued based on the gold value and the interest in it. And we soon, one way, how we find out that things are very interesting is by studying the clicks and the repeated clicks from logged in users on the site on certain items. So we know very early if an item is going to be interesting in the sale, if it's likely that there's going to be a lot of bidding action by tracking the behavior of users in the site. And then the auctioneer also has a screen in front of him where he sees what logged in bidders. You need to unlock the bid button, for instance. The auctioneer will see immediately when someone unlocks the bid button, and then he will get all the data from that person, so he will know how often that person typically bids and how long they take to bid. So sometimes he can speed up or slow down the auction. And that can get pretty interesting if a lot of interest is on some item, on one item. So that item had a lot of bids, obviously. The most crazy bidding action we had was on a cat, on a bronze cat from the Third Dynasty Egyptian, which, much to my shame, one of our appraised experts, judged as a later piece. But bidders had a different opinion, and starting price was €300, and they drove it up to 280,000 on a bidding war which lasted 14 minutes. And there were 90 bidders involved in that bidding action, which for a very niche area such as Egyptian collectibles is huge. And they keep bidding, crisscross from all over the world. And then the last one to mention, which I also like because it has a great story, was a Patek Philippe 2499 chronometer, which we sold for €380,000. And the cool thing was that in the bidding room, we always had the flag from the country of the bidder and the first name of the bidder and the pedal number. So it would say Marianne from London, right? And very few people have an issue with that because they think they cannot be detected by their first name. But this guy who bought the Patek Philippe from California, he called me, and it was Jeffrey, I think Jeffrey from California. And the guy called me the next morning and said, I'm terribly disappointed. You ruined my life as a collector. I cannot feel safe anymore. Everyone knows I bought this watch. And I said, wait a minute. There must be at least 100,000 Jeffreys. There's only one who can afford to buy this watch. New view, and we then put an anonymization feature, which allows bidder to stay completely anonymous.
Now it changed. Alexander, we would like to thank you for your time, for coming from Berlin to speak to us. I will definitely be, following you because you have entrepreneurship and online auctions, live video in your blood. So I'm sure there's going to be something interesting going forward. I'm sure you're going to build a few other companies in the future.
At least one.
At least one. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexander Zacke, founder of Auctionata.
Thank you.